Welcome, everybody. This is The Lawyer Show. I'm your lawyer, Jeremy Rosenthal. This is our weekly podcast where we talk about the law, we talk about lawyers, we talk about all things associated with lawyers, and that kind of stuff. Just kind of a bad habit I think we picked up during the pandemic and we just can't get rid of because it's just too much fun. Today we have a couple of exciting things kind of going on. We have a first. We have a big first. We have two big firsts. Two big things. Number one is that due to the efforts of my guest today, our office manager, Heidi Stark, due to her efforts and her sustained, continued push, we have uploaded our first ever episodes onto Spotify.
So exciting. I mean, this is like the biggest ever.
It's epic.
It is.
It's epic. I mean, I think that they're going to look back in decades to this day.
Yeah.
And people will not know that this never started necessarily on Spotify. It'd be like a trivia question. And this leads into my second big headline of today, which is that my guest, not really a guest, my co-host today is Heidi Stark, my office manager, who comes with me to every podcast. She normally sits way over there, takes kind of shots from the cheap seats, sort of, so to speak. But so today, many reasons for Heidi to be doing this today and helping me out. Number one is it's taken me probably about the better part of last 7 months to kind of finally get her to come on and put a microphone on and to come on camera on air. That's number one. Number two is we didn't schedule a guest today because I was at a conference and I came back and I didn't know if I was going to be back in time to make the podcast, and so we just thought, why not do it this way? We'll just have it this week. It'll probably be more entertaining. I am curious to kind of pick Heidi's brain on a lot of issues. So today the topic of the Lawyer Show is going to be criminal law. Normally what we focus on pretty much every week, my goal is to have folks on here who don't do what I do. Not that I find what I do, criminal law, criminal defense, not that I find it boring. I just find it more engaging for everybody if we have a show or a podcast that kind of digs into different areas, gives everybody a little bit of variety on different practice areas, right?
Right.
But today let's do some criminal law, Heidi.
Criminal Law 101.
Criminal Law
this.
101.
Yeah.
Which, by the way,
we've done some speaking events about Criminal Law 101.
In fact, yes. And see, I've already kind of done one little humble brag today. You know, I'm not that going to a conference is that big of a deal. You know, but
you're on the board.
Well, actually, I've rolled off of the board.
Okay.
We have
previous board member.
We have term limits on the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association has a board of directors, and they have term limits. I have termed out.
Okay.
But I am still expected to participate because I love the entity, I love the organization, I love the purpose. You know, the folks who are in there, many of them are good friends of mine, and I believe in the higher cause.
Yeah.
And anyway, and it was at South Padre Island, which, but for the fact it rained the whole time.
That's unfortunate.
So I just got back from that.
Moments ago.
Moments ago, yes, and I've been up since 4 a.m. To be here with everybody today for our 5 viewers, 4 viewers, 3. You don't tell me how many is on there. It's just going to depress me. But see, the thing too is that now that we're on Spotify, and eventually, hopefully, iTunes and whatever other places that we can spread the good word. The fact that we're like dressed like lawyers and professionally is just nobody really cares.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't. Anyway.
Life's coming back. People are dressing up again.
Indeed. So I'm curious to pick your brain, Heidi, because you came to, you know, we tricked you, baited you, fooled you into coming and working for a criminal defense law firm.
This was going to be a stepping stone for me, I have to admit, when I first came in. This was not, well, I didn't see this as a forever. I did not.
Okay.
This was going to be kind of like until I find my next
But you've
thing.
seen the error of your ways, and now
Yeah.
you're in. Now you're
Now I'm
like,
in.
this is it.
6 years in. Yeah.
Well, okay, so the water cooler talk at our office is, I mean, we can't just like throw people in the deep. I don't think we did that to you.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Not too badly. I did get a little spooked out when I went to court with you the first time, I have to admit, and had to really think. I mean, you and I had a very deep conversation on the way back of like, how do you do this? How can I do this?
Did you come? I know that you sat with me for a trial. I know that you.
I did,
that
but
you
it was
helped
prior
out.
to that. It was a DWI
Okay.
case,
Okay.
and it was, I guess it was, in front of the judge. The judge was making the decision on his punishment that day, and
Okay.
you said, come sit with me at the table, because I thought I was just going to be sitting in the gallery, like in the back. Like I was like, sure, I'll come. And then you're like, nope, sit up here. You're going to sit between me and the client, and if he has any questions or concerns, he's going to pass a note to me. You're going to pass it on to me,
Okay.
on to you.
Normally we win these things. That's another part
You
of
did.
the bragging.
You did win that day.
Of course, yeah.
Yes.
Normally, see that's a big part of this too. I was mentioning that humble brags, and then there's just like bragging,
Yeah.
and that's a big. Okay, so obviously, and DWI is a very big part of our practice. I
Very
don't
big.
want to know. I don't know if we can put a number on it. 30, 40, 50% of what we do. Probably not 50%, but
Probably close, though.
It's
it's
up-
big,
it's-
yeah.
it's
It's
as-
definitely the biggest.
yeah, it probably is. So these in many ways run together, but obviously this was kind of like you watching your first hand grenade go off.
Yep.
So keep going. You were saying interesting things before I cut you off.
Well, you made a police officer recite the alphabet backwards. She
No,
then
I-
cried. She was not happy about that because she missed the letter M. in that.
Backwards? I don't know if I've ever made
You
it.
did. You
she
did.
make she must have made the client do that backwards.
She did make
Okay,
him do
that's
it
right.
backwards.
I remember this now. I
Yes.
remember this now.
So that was a
Okay.
little jarring for me because, and as I always have and will always respect police officers, and you were very respectful to her. It was just kind of a different setting for me to kind of
Yeah.
be on that side of things and have a different viewpoint. And we had a conversation in the car. How do you do this? How do you do this every day? How are you able to be a defense attorney? And so it was enlightening for me to kind of understand that people like myself, like my neighbors, like my friends can run into problems, and our firm, as there are others out there, help them kind of navigate that legal system, because you cannot do it on your own. There's no way.
Well, we have 7 lawyers in our office.
Yep.
Not that this episode's going to be an infomercial, but it's going to be an infomercial.
Well.
It's fine. We have 7 lawyers in our office, and we're in the suburbs.
Yes.
And people don't understand many times how we can build a successful criminal practice in the suburbs. And so sometimes people have a hard time recognizing it's your neighbors, it's your neighbors' neighbors, it's your neighbors' kids, it's your neighbors' parents. There's dysfunction is not limited to what we think of as high crime areas.
Right.
It's everywhere.
Right. And I
And-
think that's hard for people to kind of recognize, for sure.
And they typically don't unless or until it's it's them. And last week we talked to Jorge Barunda, Houston lawyer, does products liability, and he echoed what I think is a very common thing in our practice, which is everybody is pro law enforcement, everybody is pro public safety, everybody is on the team, the quote unquote team, until they're not. And then they come to our office and then they say, well, what about my rights? And I'm like, dude, you've been applauding taking away everybody else's rights for, and everybody else does. And so that's one of our challenges is to, when we go to court, it particularly with the jury, it's our challenge to, and not to be too, not to be too demonstrative or over the top about it, but you got to give the Constitution a little context. You got to give it meaning, right? The Fifth Amendment, for instance, the right to remain silent. People think most folks, if you just ask them, they just kind of think it's They think it's a trick for guilty people. They think it's the way that a guilty person hides. And maybe there's truth to that. Maybe there is some truth to that. But when I'm picking a jury and I'm talking to jurors about the Fifth Amendment, I kind of got to, you just got to give it the flavor that I think the framers of the Constitution meant to give it, which is, in America, we focus on evidence. We don't focus on your face.
Correct.
In China, in North Korea, in third world countries, they put you in a room, they put a spotlight on you, and they focus on your face as you answer. And so what we have to do is we have to talk to jurors about, well, okay, what's a guilty person look like when they're talking? What's a liar look like when they're talking? Do they cry? Are those alligator tears? Or are they real tears? And even if you know, Susie Main Street or Joe Lunchpail, even if you have a special power to diagnose this, which you don't, statistics tell us that you don't. Even if you believe that you have the special power to diagnose this, can you get 11 other folks to agree with your assessment? Right? Out of the other 12 jurors, how many of you are going to think that these crocodile tears are real? I mean, they can argue all day about it.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if somebody looks them directly in the eye, well, that's rehearsed. Or if somebody's looking at the ceiling or looking at the floor, and, oh, by the way, you've only had 15 months to think about this morning, noon, and night, the day that you're going to testify to, the biggest day of your life, which is your trial. And so then when we say, and then I say, time out, how about we focus on the evidence? Anybody? The Fifth Amendment makes a lot of sense in that regard. And so kind of what I wanted to do today as well was just kind of go through good, bad, and ugly of the criminal justice system. You've already kind of hit on some of it. And kind of talking about law enforcement, we do have a very different relationship as criminal lawyers, as a criminal law firm to law enforcement. I mean, I was raised to believe that the police are my friend.
Yes, as I was as well.
And I do my best to raise my child the same way. Police officers are people who run into a building when everybody's running out. Police officers are the folks who are rescuing people from cars with the jaws of life. Police officers are held to a very high standard, which at some point can be difficult, I'm sure, of honesty and integrity. So there's a tremendous amount of respect that I have for them. However, when I'm in the courtroom, I have to put that hat on that says, no, we've got to, there's everybody in America, in my mind, has somebody that grades their papers. Mm-hmm. Not that, and the jury grades the police officers' papers,
yes.
Not the prosecutors, sometimes the judge, but it's the jury that will grade their paper. And cross-examine, and I'll tell you, when I left the DA's office, when I was a prosecutor for some years, when I left the DA's office, one of the first ways that I knew that I was a defense lawyer, that I knew I had gone to the darker side, and there to stay, was the first time I had a police officer, a law enforcement officer on the witness stand who would play games, who wouldn't answer straightforward questions, who thought it was his job to win the case on the stand. Cross-examining them, officer, the car was blue, wasn't it? Or officer, the car was blue. Was that a question? Let me think here. You've testified 78 times in your life, and every time you knew that what the lawyers said were questions. You knew the 68 questions this other lawyer, this prosecutor just asked you. Somehow you knew that those were all questions, and now all of a sudden you forgot. You just don't want to answer. So, okay, so we'll change the question. The car was blue. Isn't that a fact? Now it's a question. Please answer. Well, I don't know if it was. It depends by what you mean as blue. There's different kinds of blue. There's this, and I'm not being literal. This is not an actual example. But when you have when you're in that situation, you have a job to do. I think in the interests of for your client and the interests of justice, and it involves kind of punching through the minutia that that individual is throwing up at you. Whether they're wearing a uniform, whether they're not wearing a uniform, it does not matter.
Absolutely. Because if it was you in that seat that you were defending
Right.
them, you would want your attorney to do that. And I know a lot of people have had that experience to realize what it's like to sit in that seat.
That's exactly true. That's exactly true. And so, and that, kind of gives me another perspective, another sort of thing to sort of share, which is that, and this is a question I get a lot of. And I think we talked about it. I think we also talked about it with Jorge Barunda last week, which is when the client asks you, well, what would you do if it was you? And I get that a ton. We get that a ton in our office, right? You do a lot of hand-holding with
There's a lot
our
of counseling that goes on with people, yes, because it's probably the most stress they've probably ever been under. When they're coming to us, when they make that first phone call to us, they are freaking out.
Well, the hand grenade has gone off in their living room.
Yeah.
This type of thing doesn't happen to us. We're not
not those people.
Right. And in Collin County, probably our biggest, we get a lot of DWI calls.
Yes.
We get a lot of domestic violence calls.
That's our number 2, for sure.
We get a lot of calls on probably drug cases, on mental illness type cases, which a lot of times mental illness with drugs is kind of a salt and pepper, right? You usually see the two together, not always, but a lot of times we definitely see the two together. But to answer the question that Jorge and I talked about last week, what I tell the client and what I said last week, and again, what I tell the client is, I'm not you. I'm not you. I am, I am and as a lawyer, we have to be in some way, well, there's the saying that's only a fool, a person who represents themselves has a fool for a client. And what that means, literally, what that saying in my mind means is that you are so married to your problem that you cannot detach yourself from it.
Right.
If you were a surgeon, you could not operate on yourself, nor should you.
Correct.
You're going to make emotional decisions, not medical decisions. And when I get pulled over by the police, right, for speeding, and a police officer asks me if I know what I've been pulled over for, I say, yes, I was speeding, and oh, by the way, here's the 17 other infractions that I made that you don't know about. I haven't updated my driver's license. I don't think my insurance is up to date. I didn't go to the dentist, and I was supposed to go. Yeah. I mean, so what happens is I am not dispassionate enough. I cannot, for my own legal issues or troubles, I am too emotionally connected to them to make rational judgments. So another thing that we have to do, and it takes younger lawyers, I think, in my mind, a long time to learn this lesson. It takes younger lawyers a long time to learn that you are not your client, and that your client's situation is, you cannot make your client's problem your problem.
Right.
That's a problem I definitely see younger lawyers make. One thing that we do at our law firm, again with 7 lawyers, one of the other types of cases that we handle a lot of are sexually oriented charges and offenses, which are obviously no joke. They're extraordinarily serious every way around that you can think of them. But one thing that I've always thought is important is that each of our lawyers, whether or not, of course, lawyers are going to have moral objections to certain types of cases, and we don't make lawyers do cases they don't want to do.
Everybody has their preferences, but it's probably a good idea to know what 1 or 2 of those cases is like, I would imagine.
Exactly. You have to have, in my mind as a criminal defense lawyer, you have to have the experience of putting your heart, your soul, everything that you know into a case and having a judge say, oh, that's cute, go away with, defendant, you're sentenced to 25, 35, 45 years, go with the bailiff, right?
That's a tough day, I bet.
It's a hard day. And so sometimes as lawyers, we get so wrapped up in the client's problem, we make it our problem. We think that it's our fault when the client has a certain situation. We obviously never want it to be our fault. We obviously want to give adequate and the best representation that we can. But we also have to we have to be able to be aggressive enough, right? We can't be the guy who's behind the wheel who says, "Officer, you got me speeding, and oh, by the way, here's the 18 other things that we did." You have to be aggressive about it. You have to be able to say, "Well, is your thing calibrated? Is your how long have you been following me? How?" You have to be able to, and that only comes from a zealous advocate who is detached emotionally from the problem.
Yes.
So that's another thing that I think that's really, really important. Again, that anyway, I'm just talking at this point. I'm also kind of curious to hear some of your other observations. And when did you know that you were like, when were you like, I don't know, and maybe you never were. Was there ever a point when you're like, oh my God, what have I gotten? What have I signed up for?
That day when we did the DWI, I was like, I have gone to the dark side. What am I doing? This was a huge mistake.
The darker side.
The darker side.
It's relative.
Yes.
Many people would. In fact, I think we're the good guys. Let's just go ahead.
I do
and say
now.
that.
I do see it.
Well, of course we are.
That now, but coming in super green, having not had a law experience before I came to the firm. It was jarring, yeah.
And every lawyer, by the way, thinks that they're the good guy. It doesn't matter if you write a will. It doesn't matter if you do intellectual property. It doesn't matter if you are evicting people from a house, okay? Every lawyer thinks that they're the good guy, period, end of story. But they're all wrong because we're the good guys. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, and I couldn't work here if I didn't really believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get on the phone with these people and really walk them through why do you need to come in and have a consultation with us if I didn't truly believe that. And I do. And it didn't take me long to really get there, but I had to experience some of those bigger things, where I went to court, had some of those hard phone calls with people, saw some hard, things happen in the office that made me believe this is the right place for people to come.
Well,
we do take care of people's problems.
Well, you're on the phone. You spend a lot of time because one of the things that you do a lot of. You're on the phone quite a bit with our clients, kind of and again, you're the office manager. Okay?
I like to know everything that's going on. That's just kind of my makeup, and it's probably a weakness and a strength. But yes, I like to know what's going on because I can't help other people do their jobs if I don't know what their job is. And if your job is picking up the phone, answering calls, then I need to know how that works too.
Right.
So I do try to stay in that mix as much as possible and answer phone calls at least a couple of times a day.
And your specialty, so we brought you on originally to do just kind of social media type stuff. And that morphed into you making sure that there's WD-40 because we got a squeaky door somewhere in the in the kitchen.
And then I quickly found a new credit card processing company for you. So that's kind of how that morphed in. Yes, I jumped right in. I find problems and I think I would bring them to you and be like, "Here's the solution," and you were like, "Okay, go do it."
Yeah, I don't. Yes, I'm here struggling with these great questions. Yes. So, okay, and my hope today, too, was that we would get some comments and questions. I know that what I meant to do is talk to a handful of folks so we can stack the deck and have some questions in the can. I'm sure that, so if you're watching, and I don't know that anybody is, if you have a question for myself, for Heidi, you're going to get a better answer, obviously, from her, about anything criminal justice, law office management, whatever, talk. Anything you want to know, my opinion of the weather in South Padre Island and why I got rained on, whatever, send it in. The theory of doing it live, was that we were going to have interaction with our audience. And
we have to some extent.
Yeah.
Some topics are easier to have interaction with others than other topics. Like last week was a little difficult. But it was a great guest, and he had some great comments.
Well, sometimes we got to dig a little deep.
Yep.
You're watching JP, Kathy, and the Crew Network. You can watch JP, Kathy, and the Crew between 7:30 and 9, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This is the Lawyer Show. We are on between noon and 1 every Thursdays, and you can catch us on Spotify. We're loading those episodes
slowly,
one at a time.
Yep, we are.
We don't want to give everybody everything all at once.
No.
This is going to be like when the Disney Channel rolls out one episode at a time of like a Marvel
Yep. Mandalorian. You gotta wait.
We're gonna So don't think you're gonna go and download 30 hours of this at least tomorrow. I mean, we've done 30 episodes.
We've had 2 seasons.
35.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Probably.
It took me that long to finally get Heidi to be like.
It took me this long to be a guest. Yes.
Well, there you go. No, and this was because I asked you a long time ago.
You did. I politely declined. Yes.
Well, and again, this may be the last time we have you on, with the microphones on your ear and all that stuff. We'll see how this goes.
We'll see how this goes. Yeah.
So, and I think, again, kind of my attitude and my thought for this show is just to kind of talk about criminal justice, good, bad, and ugly. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about a little bit about criminal defense lawyers. Because, again, of course I'm a fan. Of course I think that we hung the moon. Of course I think that we're the good guys. Let me tell you, and so I do. Another thing I've always kind of thought with the podcast, I've never wanted to be too like rah-rah cheerleader about anything. I've also not wanted to be like squawk kind of, well, we're just going to criticize things and just kind of rip things apart. But so I kind of, I hopefully try to approach things, kind of balanced. But okay, so criminal lawyers. So one of the reasons, frankly, that I left the DA's office, and this is going to sound crazy and terrible, I thought it was too easy.
Really?
I thought it was too easy.
Even with the caseload that you were carrying at the time? The
caseload's the big challenge as a prosecutor because you do have a whole lot of cases. You have
I mean, how many cases probably?
Well, I'd have to look back and think back, but I mean, we could have hundreds at a time.
Okay.
You could have 1, 2, 3, 400, maybe even more. I don't know. But they were all kind of one size fits all. And so that is the challenge to being a prosecutor is that the volume is there. But having said that, particularly in Collin County back when I was doing that, what I found was that when I was picking a jury, all my jokes would be funny. I would put police officers.
New audience every time. I mean, how?
New shtick every time, and all my jokes would be funny, and I would throw witnesses, police officers on the stand, and the juries would just fawn over them. I asked the same formulaic set of questions every time. As a prosecutor, part of your job as a prosecutor is you do have to play it down the middle, which you have a duty to seek justice, which therein lies. The devil's in that detail, which is, well, because I think everybody's guilty, which is how some prosecutors think. Because everybody's guilty, well, I'm always doing justice by prosecuting you. So it makes that it sort of makes that it makes that general order a little worthless when your attitude and your worldview is such that's kind of the thing. But anyway, I just did not particularly think it was that challenging.
That's the key. You got to have a challenge.
And so I did not feel particularly challenged by that task. Now, in fairness to prosecutors, in fairness to the DA's office, I was very junior. They were not handing me capital murders. They were not, giving me, here's the city councilman who's been, taking bribes for a decade and we finally caught him. Jeremy, go get him. They weren't giving me that stuff. But still, the cases that I was handling, I didn't particularly think they were too much of a challenge. And we would have the opportunity to go against good defense lawyers, not all the time.
Yeah.
And this kind of will, and I will segue this into one of my criticisms of my brethren on the defense lawyer side. Many of them can be quite lazy.
Correct.
And many of them do not share the attitude that we have the duty and the job to test the state's case, test the law enforcement, test the law.
Right.
Put our judges to difficult questions. Many of them think if I laugh at all the jokes of the prosecutor and I just am nice, then I'll get a decent result for my client. And again, that can be true a fraction of the time.
Right.
But that's one of my biggest frustrations with other defense lawyers. is that, again, some of them have a book allergy. Some of them, they don't do a lot of legal research. They're not particularly creative. The only time I see them, some of them, and again, the good news is there's very few that are like this in my mind. But the only time they seem to get angry is if they accept court-appointed cases and their pay gets screwed with, and they show up and get angry
At that.
with the judges and the
Yes.
commissioners. And I'm like, where's this passion when your client's getting screwed?
Right.
You know, where was this passion when you've got a 19 or 20 or a 21-year-old kid who will never get a job at a bank if he pleads guilty to this theft case?
Correct.
You know?
That's a big one. We see people come in all the time, and they've made deals with other attorneys
Mhm.
representing them, and they did not think through what would happen 10 years from now, 20 years from now when I decide to change careers, and you have to tell that
That's
person,
right.
I'm so sorry, that decision has been made and is done with a bow on it, and there's nothing that can be changed.
Right.
That's awful.
It's
awful.
heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And so that's one of my frustrations, I think, with other defense lawyers. One thing, too, that I would say, and again, to kind of back up, what I tell folks is when they, and I get this question a lot, too, which it doesn't make me angry that I get asked this question. It's perfectly understandable. I probably would ask the same question if I didn't do what I do. We get asked a lot, how can you defend somebody you know is guilty?
Right.
We get asked that a lot, and that's a cocktail party question. That's that we do. And number one, anybody who comes into our office, we're helping a person. We're helping a human being. We're helping him, her, and almost always, invariably, their family that comes in with them.
Right.
That doesn't understand, again, why the hand grenade went off in their living room. So we help people, number one. Number two, I don't know how many folks I have represented in my life, 3,000, 3,500, 4,000. When I left the DA's office, a lot of court-appointed work. We don't have a public defender in Collin County. And so that was a good way to sell your time. It was a good way to get a lot of experience under your belt.
A lot of different types of cases, I'm sure.
A lot of different types of cases. And fortunately for I've graduated from that, but the experience was irreplaceable. And so of the a million, billion, however many people I've represented in my life, and what I tell folks who say, well, how can you represent somebody that you know is guilty? Number one, I don't know. I wasn't there.
You weren't there.
I wasn't there. I don't know. And maybe there's a lot of really bad evidence for us, but if I was there, I'd be a witness to the case. And so number one, I don't know. I don't know that what my client did or didn't do. That's how lawyers operate. That's how we are. That's what we do. That's just the nature of the beast. That's number one. Number two is, I would say of all the people that I've represented in my entire life, I would tell you that maybe 2 or 3 were sociopaths or were just so awful that they made me kind of take a step back
Right.
and sort of be concerned. Many of our clients
That is not the majority that we see
No,
that come in the office, for sure.
Absolutely not. I feel very strongly that many of our clients didn't do what they're accused of doing. And again, I wasn't there, so maybe they did. I don't know. But number one, I feel like a lot of them didn't do what they were accused of doing. And number two, I feel like a lot of them did what they did because there's the axiom. Am I using that right?
I think so.
We have Kyle
100%.
Taryn in our office.
He would be able to tell us.
He would tell me if I'm using
sure
that
he
word
will.
appropriately. He's not watching.
Not
he'll
today.
he'll
no.
tell us
He's on
later.
the plane.
He's on a what?
He's on a plane today.
Oh, that's right. That's right. He's going out of town. But the axiom is hurt people,
Correct.
right? And
There's
so
usually a root problem.
there's exactly everybody views themselves as a good person, and in most ways, most people are.
Yeah.
Most people will hold the door for an old lady. Most people will
Stop to let you cross the street.
Yes. You know, most people are decent. They really, truly are. But they may have a mental illness, which which dictates what they do. They may have an addiction, which dictates what they do.
Past trauma that's triggered by something.
Past trauma. They may have. There may be some dysfunction.
Yes.
That's going on there. And let's not confuse this. That doesn't mean they need to be running around free in America either.
No,
okay?
It doesn't give them the right to disobey the law. Correct.
That's right. And many of my clients, in some ways, although it's not my job to make this decision, many of our clients may very well deserve to be behind bars. And maybe the safest place for them to be is behind bars. That doesn't mean that we don't fight our hardest for them.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that they don't deserve a defense. And that doesn't mean, in some ways, I might not, and that doesn't mean that I may not see the good person in them, the person that does, hold a door for an elderly person. And many of our clients have hurt others very badly.
Yes.
And so it's very much a balance to try to make sure that when we're in a courtroom that we give context to the 40,000-foot view. What I tell many of our clients is that you're a file to the prosecutor. That's all you are, right?
A number, yeah.
That's you. And it consists of what you did on the very worst day of your life. And maybe if you've had 2 or 3 other days that have been really bad, that's in there too, okay? But the time that you helped your best friend, the time that you woke up at 2 in the morning to go get them because their car stalled 3 hours away, that's not in there. The time that you cut your hair off for a cancer fundraiser, that's not in there. That's part of the picture too. And again,
that you're a good husband, that you're a good father.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean that doesn't negate what's in that file, but it
gives a clearer picture.
It gives a clear picture, and it's our job to advocate that to anybody who will listen, the prosecutor, or a jury, or a judge. But let's criticize other people here.
Okay.
For a minute, let's move on. Who should we go after next, Heidi?
Well,
who do you feel like criticizing now that I've tricked you into coming on the air? You thought, and it was going so well. This was so safe.
Yeah.
Right.
It was going so great.
It was going so, and it was just going infomercial, and then I throw that. I did hear, so at my conference, some of my friends, I read a book, or maybe I don't remember where I saw this, that said good icebreakers. Here's a good icebreaker.
Okay.
The next time you see somebody for the first time, you ask them, just like in a social situation, right?
Yeah.
Instead of talking about the weather.
Because that's the go-to. Yeah.
Ask them, what's the most expensive thing you ever stole?
Oh, stole.
And so I asked a friend's significant other that, and I was reminded of that the other day.
Okay.
But then they were asking me, they said, well, why did you ask that to her for the first time that you ever met her? Why would you ask her that? And I said, my response was, well, you remember it, don't you? You remember that I asked that question, don't you?
True.
So in that vein,
I mean, usually people have a little bit more boundaries when they first meet somebody, but that's a little kind of outside the boundary zone. Like, I mean, I would have a tough time with that when I've never stolen anything.
Oh, okay.
I haven't.
Oh, okay.
I'm that person. No, my mother and father put the fear of God into me, not to steal something that wasn't mine.
How did they do that? Was it because you were 5 and you stole something?
No, I didn't. I've never stolen anything. I've never done that. Yeah. But that's a good question to ask people, though. I would imagine people have probably stolen something.
Just anybody watching this, just make sure the statute of limitations is run on any offense that you confess to stealing something to. Number one.
Under $50, you want to keep it probably, yeah.
Well, if it's, so let's see, there's a value ladder for theft offenses.
Yeah.
Theft is dictated by the amount that you're alleged to have stolen under state law. I believe it is $2,500 now. Anything under $2,500 is a misdemeanor. Used to be under $1,500. Now it's anything under $2,500 is a misdemeanor, and that has a 2-year statute of limitations.
Okay, so 2 years.
And a felony in most instances is going to be 3. Okay. But yes. So what's the most? Well, you don't have to answer that.
I can't answer that. I have not stolen anything. The only thing that could possibly go on that list is going to the grocery store and stealing some grapes off of the grape thing,
okay.
which is super unsanitary. But I probably did do that.
I thought you didn't steal anything, Heidi.
That
now we're getting somewhere.
Well, I probably have done that. Yeah. I probably have done that. It's not super exciting, though. Definitely, because COVID. There was no way I'm doing that now.
What county did you don't? You know what? My advice is not to answer that. But I think where I was going is I wanted to criticize some people after I remind everybody that they're watching JP, Kathy, and the Crew Network. You can watch JP, Kathy, and the Crew between 7:30 and 9 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. This is the Lawyer Show. We're on between noon and 1 on Thursdays, and you can download us on Spotify.
Yes.
Okay, so
criticize. Who am I going to criticize? I'm going to criticize people that don't have both brake lights working. That irritates me. I mentioned this earlier. It's one of my pet peeves since working at the firm. You're giving the police the opportunity to pull you over. Don't.
Okay, so we did talk about this a little bit before going on the air.
Yes, because we just recently had a client that this happened to.
Okay, so everybody knows the police. The way that it works is the police can. We have different levels of police contact. Okay, there's what we call a voluntary encounter, which means that the police do not have to have any reason whatsoever to come up to you and ask you if you have a lighter or a match on the street corner. Okay, it's America. They can come up to you. They can ask you. You have the right to say no. You have the right to walk away. Practically speaking, most of us are a touch more intimidated than that, but that's the theory, right? Then we have what's called an investigative detention, which means that you do not have the right to walk away. You are not under arrest, but that would be your typical traffic stop as a perfect example, easiest example of an investigative detention. So once the officer makes that detention, if the officer develops probable cause for anything under the sun, DWI, theft, could be murder, okay? After a traffic stop, in those instances, then that's typically where many cases kind of bloom or flower from, right? So what Heidi's saying is when you don't have your brake lights working, you're just asking.
It's an invitation.
It's an invitation. My thought on that is that police, so they're humans, and I mean, let's just be honest, they target people, and they would be the first to admit it, okay? Where it gets to be legally problematic is when they target people for no reason or arbitrary reasons,
right,
or reasons that we don't like thinking about this, but unfortunately race, we've learned the hard way, is just simply a factor for some law enforcement officers, which they'll never admit to. There's a lot of cases that come from the Supreme Court back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s is called the Warren Court after the Chief Justice, Earl Warren. And so the Warren Court issued a landmark opinion called Terry versus Ohio. So we hear a lot of what are called Terry stops. And basically what police would do is they would say, well, I had a hunch, right? I had a hunch that you were up to no good. And that kind of works for television, but when we translate it, it means you're a person of color.
Which is terrible.
But what the courts try to do is they try to make police articulate. They try to make police use what we call articulable fact. In other words, okay, officer, hunch. If you tell us you had a hunch, we're going to say that this detention was no good.
Right.
Right. You have to articulate why you think it is.
What did you see? What did you hear? What was going on?
That's right.
Yep.
And so if they can articulate your brake light was out, that is an articulable fact which they can explain, which will justify a detention.
Yes. And you're right. They can pull you over for a lot of different things. My thought on that is don't make that one of them. Because that's an easy one.
Well,
and there's a lot of people out there driving around with only one brake light.
You got to make it hard. Now, okay, so like, put your police officer hat on, right?
Yeah.
You are cruising at 5 a.m, and you go to a gas station and you see some guy that has 800 prison tats on his face.
Yeah.
Okay, and is driving a crappy car.
Yeah.
You're following him.
Yeah.
As soon as he gasses up and as soon as he goes down whatever parkway, police officer's going to follow him,
because it looks out of the norm.
Or her.
Correct. Or her.
Or her, until they make a bad right-hand turn, or if their brake light doesn't work. Sometimes we see one of the. I mean, it's a real traffic stop. But if your traffic light, if your brake light isn't or not your brake light, the license plate light is not working.
Yeah.
The police can stop you.
Yep.
And that's a violation of Texas law. It is a legitimate stop. Now, it doesn't happen to old ladies who are returning their library books to the public library. That's not where people get nailed for that.
Right.
Okay. It's 2 a.m, and I think you were
you're in an area where it looks like maybe you don't belong, possibly.
You look like a shitbird.
Yeah.
And so that's why that's why
yes.
That's why you tend to get pulled over. So when you say make sure your brake lights are working, I see what you're saying. Lawyer Jeremy thinks, well, okay, 2 or 3 blocks later we were going to get pulled over for not stopping at the stoplight.
A complete stop.
Right. or
right.
something like that. But what other?
That's just irritating to me, though. I mean, you should have your brake lights working anyway.
And I think another legal thing.
I think another irritating thing that we hear all the time is
the brake lights. By the way, if they emit any red within 1,000 feet, it's good. Your brake lights are legally working. But go ahead. Sorry, I thought I'd throw that out there. Sorry, Heidi.
That's all right. No, the other thing that bothers me is people when we meet people and we. Pre-COVID, ton of networking. We were out meeting people all the time, talking about the firm, talking about criminal law 101. That's never going to happen to me. I don't need to know a criminal defense attorney.
Well, it's fun when it's fun when 6 weeks later they call and they say, "Oh my God."
We've had it before where
we didn't think it would ever happen to me.
An hour. It's been an
hour
hour
right.
since we had that conversation with somebody.
Yes.
We always say, put our number in your phone. This is the number you need to have that we hope you never have to call. This person actually did it. And an hour later, I got a phone call.
And most of the time, it's a family member.
Correct.
Or a friend.
It's a family member or friend.
And that's kind of what so everybody's got a friend. Everybody has a friend of a friend of a friend. And we do encourage folks to put our number in their phones.
If not us, someone else.
Us.
Yes, you're right. If this is going to be a sales
pitch,
pitch,
if you believe in
us.
paying lawyers a lot of money, then us.
Well, you know how I feel about that.
972-369-0577. I've joked that the main topic of this podcast is our phone number.
Yes.
I don't know that I've ever given.
I don't think you've ever given it before. I think this is the first time, really.
So so put it in your phone, 972-369-0577.
Answer 24 hours a day.
That's true, we do.
There is a lawyer on call 24 hours a day.
We always have a lawyer that is on call.
Yeah, because you don't want to be making emotional decisions. You don't want to be making decisions to what attorney to find when you are very emotional about what has just happened, and that's what happens to you. I'm a perfect example of that. We had something happen in my family. I had worked at the firm several years, and a flood of emotion comes over you because it is a bomb being dropped on you. And I luckily knew what to do and had 7 lawyers' phone numbers in my phone. But
not
it's
everybody
very true.
does. Yeah,
not everybody does.
And it can be very. Another thing too that we see a lot of is when folks come into the office. The internet is such a good thing and a bad thing.
Yes.
Because folks will come in and they will ask increasingly very well-informed questions based on what they read online, which is, I think, a wonderful thing. But they also work themselves into a bit of a panic because the internet lacks context and it lacks.
Every case is different. Every county is different.
Another thing I was going to mention today was another question that we get asked. I don't get asked this so much, but I also get asked from time to time, what's your win-loss record?
Yeah.
Which is, I understand why people ask that.
They don't know what to ask, so I think that's the only way they know how to ask that question.
Maybe.
Yeah.
My reply to that is we made the playoffs last year. Which kind of,
because you love sports analogies, and so that makes
sports
total
analogies
sense.
work, and they're usually right on the money. But when we talk about, I mean, yes, cases come in all different shapes and sizes, and victory in any case may look different.
It can be a lot of different things, a victory.
Sure. I mean, sometimes, okay, it depends on what's going on, but if somebody comes in with a professional license,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And the charges are something that in my mind are relatively minor, but it threatens that license in any way, shape, or form.
Their career could
That
be
is
over.
that is bet your career litigation right there. I mean, that is a case that there is really going to be only one acceptable outcome. If we have another case that comes in, and the facts may be really against us, if our client has gone and confessed to everybody that they know to confess to, and there's other types of evidence, there's video, and there's maybe whatever, biological evidence and other things that are really hard to get around. Sometimes victory is keeping that person out of jail.
Correct.
So they all come in different shapes and sizes. People have different backgrounds. Sometimes somebody will come in and has been in trouble many times in their life. Sometimes they come in and they've never been in trouble in their life. So
I think the best answer to that, other than we made the playoffs, which is,
the
that's
best
great.
answer, because it's mine.
Yes, but then the second best answer would be a majority of the work that comes into us is referrals, and people do not refer criminal defense attorneys that they did not have a favorable outcome with. That's just the facts. And a lot of our business is based on referrals.
We want happy customers.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I try to explain to people is that, look, we want, ultimately, we want a happy customer here. And I can't guarantee any kind of result in any kind of case. But I can give you a warranty of sorts on my effort, on the amount of attention that we're going to give to you, that we're going to try to give to you.
Similar cases that you have represented folks on that are similar to theirs. I mean, there's probably not much you can't say that you haven't done at this point.
Well, yeah, and that's part of, and that's just part of being a professional, really, in anything, right? On the airplane this morning, I am sure is that we took off in wet conditions. I landed. I had a layover in Houston. We landed in wet conditions. I have confidence that the pilot has taken off and landed in wet conditions many, many times. That they've navigated through thunderstorms. That they know certain weather patterns, and they know in their mind this is how this is going to be resolved, and this is what we have to do to get the plane on the ground.
Yeah.
And then there's higher functions too, right? I mean, if you're working for a major airline, you're also being fuel efficient because we've got a friend who's an executive for a major airline, and you also have to consider that out of 4,500 flights in a day, I don't know if that's the right number, but if they can save just a percentage of fuel on each flight, that's the difference between
a lot of dollars.
That's the difference between benefits packages being paid off and not being paid. So that's when you look at a professional, that's what they do, and it doesn't matter if they're a physician. What we manage are variables.
Yes.
And so when we take a look and the variables in the legal system are going to be humans, right? We don't know how humans are going to interpret certain situations. When somebody comes into my office and they have, let's just say it's a sexual assault or something like that, and it's a state court case. Well, I can tell them, well, this is how the grand jury operates, and we may have one of several prosecutors who have different varying attitudes on these cases, and then after that, we may have one of 8 different district judges. And the situation that you're describing to me, we have some legal arguments, and I can tell you that my experience is that several judges may go for it, that we have in Collin County, several may not go for it.
Right.
And so there's just layer of variable upon variable upon variable, and what a professional can do is quantify those variables in a way that the internet can't.
Right.
And so anyway, I talk a lot.
That's why
Heidi.
you won't be replaced with. We talked about this with computers.
We heard that criminal defense lawyers are least susceptible to AI replacement than any other area of law practice.
You're safe.
Because a computer cannot talk a jury
right.
into, this is why my client was being chased down an alley by police and drove into somebody's pool.
Right.
It's just a big mistake. Computer can't do that.
No.
Or can't, I don't know. It takes a special type of bullshit artist to get there.
Right.
What else? What other messages do you have? I have a whole list of about 20 other things that we can criticize. I think so too. Well, so I told you that we would talk about other office management type stuff. What other takeaways do you have?
My big takeaway is that you know, I work with you a lot, but I also work with the other 6 attorneys in the office, and I can 100% say I feel comfortable setting up anybody that calls in for a consultation with us with any of the attorneys in our office.
And just so America,
that's a big thing. That's a big thing.
Just so America understands, you can never hire Heidi. Okay.
Everyone has a dollar amount. And everyone does.
Quiet. Okay. So, but also, anybody who wants to work at our office has to be really good at complimenting me.
Right. They do.
That's a big part. That's a big part of being in our team. And Heidi does it well enough. But yes, no,
that's
the lawyers,
a great part of the firm is
we
that
believe
we
in
are
our lawyers.
a strong, very strong team.
Mm-hmm.
I love, and that's one of the differences of us, because we are very large with 7 attorneys. That's very rare. That doesn't,
for a criminal office.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that I can tell people when they call in, you're not just getting your one attorney, you are getting the entire firm, because they constantly talk about their cases with each other, because I witness it day in and day out, which is fantastic. They're not just going in solo. And there's a lot of guys that are out there that are just by themselves. Nothing against them. But if I was making a choice, I would choose a firm.
It's always good to have a sounding board, I think any practitioner really ought to have a sounding board.
Absolutely. Because some ideas are not great ideas until you run them by somebody else.
That's true. And sometimes I would say it's more and more, I don't know. You have to trust your own judgment. You have to trust, and you have to recognize at some point that whatever call you make is going to be the call that you make.
Right.
And the client's almost always going to listen to it. So it does carry a lot of weight. Of course, there are a lot of decisions in a case that are exclusively the client's.
Correct.
Whether they plead guilty or not guilty, whether they want,
whether they go to trial,
whether they have a trial. That's right. But when we do advise a client, it does carry a lot of power, a lot of weight, or a theory that we may try to have at trial. Sometimes I may have an idea for a really more aggressive theory. It's always good to bounce it off of other folks, but you always have to understand, too, that anytime you have more chefs in the kitchen,
correct,
people are going to talk you out of ideas that can be pretty good.
Right.
Because most people, I think, operate out of fear of something going wrong. But you have to be, I think, aggressive in your own way. But there are times, obviously, even with me having practiced for 20 years.
21?
I think it's just 20.
Oh, is it just 20? Okay.
I know I look much older.
Wow.
But yes, 20 years, and even then, it's still healthy to. I still have questions. I still will come. I'll have an idea that I'm not so sure that my jury's going to like this. I'm not so sure that it's going to come down this way. But again, it can also be somewhat poison, and it can be a bit of a crutch too.
Correct.
For someone who just has paralysis by analysis.
It's a fine line.
It's a fine line.
It's nice to have it there if you need that.
Yes.
I do think. Yeah.
So maybe what we'll do, Heidi, is I'll have you. We'll do this setup again, and then we'll get to the 800
other questions that you had.
People or professions or part of our profession that I really wanted to criticize and get some. Part of my podcast too. There's a lot of I don't want to call it Richard Nixon, but I can be pretty negative, and he had an enemies list.
He did.
Yeah, and not that I have an enemies list, but what's broadcasting something like this if you can't take underhanded shots at people?
Yeah. And
they kind of know it's them, but not really.
They never really know.
No, I did want to talk a little bit more about prosecutors, a little bit more about our judiciary,
Part 2.
And part 2, we'll do it at some point in the future. How's
Yes,
that?
That sounds great.
All right. So you'll come on again?
I will come on again. This was a delight.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a lot of power too in this seat. I realize someone in the office told me that before I left, which I didn't really use today. So maybe made it part 2.
Well, maybe I don't want. Maybe this will be part 1, and that'll be it. Because maybe I'm scared now.
No.
This has been another highly successful episode of The Lawyer Show. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and have a good rest of your week.